Besides your full academic job that I imagine takes quite a lot of time, you're also an entrepreneur, which is quite unheard of for a social science audience. You are a co-founder, you're an inventor also of several startups and technologies in those startups. Crimson Hexagon, to mention one that was merged with Brandwatch, as I understand, and also acquired by another company. And then after that, you have learning, Catalytics, Three-User Perusal, Open Scholar, Quick Code, and so on and so forth. And you have several patents as well. So one natural question, and this sort of aligns with the first initial questions that I had for you in the first interview, is about finding sort of the mind space, the headspace to do this, to think about these new things. It is a totally new domain. So how do you engage yourself with business outside of your academic commitments? How do you find that time or energy?
So I think of these things not as different, but as the same thing. Think about it. When we write a paper, we leverage our co-authors, we leverage our students, we leverage the resources in our university, the library and the computer facilities and the IRB and the Office of General Counsel and on and on, and our physical office, and et cetera. We leverage them for the goals that we have.
Right.
So you know what? There's something else that you could leverage, the commercial world, which is like orders of magnitude bigger than all the things I just listed. And so if you could get them working for us, that's great. Lots of people leverage governments to produce data for them, or that already produce data and give them the data. Leveraging the commercial world is another way of it working. And in particular, what I notice is that, look, a big company could hire people I could never hire. They just pay them a lot more money. But you know what? I could hire or work with somebody that wants to be in academia, and no private company could ever hire. Take somebody that wants to spend 2 or 3 years going really deep into some particular question, or proving a mathematical theorem, or really trying to understand something. Almost no company could deal with that. You know, how do you give them raises where there's no intermediate products, et cetera.
Right.
But so that means there's people I can hire, they can't hire. There's people they can hire that I can't hire. When there's a flow of information back and forth, it makes us both a lot better. And so having opportunities to do that is really valuable. That's why we collaborate with people at other universities. It's also good to collaborate in the commercial world. And it turns out, how do you do that? How do you get companies to collaborate with you, or the people at those companies to collaborate with you?
Yeah.
One way is to actually create the companies.
Yourself, yeah.
Yeah. So there are other ways, which I have also emphasized, but one way is to create the companies.
Right. And you make it sound so easy, Gary. And we'll come to this sort of going from 0 to 1. But there's another more pressing issue that I think other people are thinking about is this conflict of interest, which is balancing academic interest and balancing business interest that could be aligned, but they can also in several occasions be misaligned. So how do you make sure that they are aligned?
So I'm interested in learning things about the world. And sometimes the best way to do that is entirely within the university. Sometimes the best way to do it is to create a big open source project like Dataverse, which I've created, OpenDP, which we're in the middle of birthing now. It's big, but it needs to get a lot bigger. It's about open differential privacy, and lots of other open source software. Sometimes the best way to do it, sometimes the best way to ensure permanence, to ensure that that something will actually get out there to the world, is by giving it value. And in the real world, that's the commercial world. You give something value and they pay for it. That's how it works. So for the most part, it's not a conflict of interest. Now, you mentioned the formal word conflict of interest. I'm absolutely obsessed with making sure that I follow all the university rules and complete reports and all that. So that's not really the issue.
No.
But conflicts of commitment, conflicts of effort, conflicts of goals.
Exactly.
I wouldn't do it if there was a conflict. So I could give you some examples of research that produced a commercial result, which then produced better research, which produced more research, which produced a whole field, which may have created new types of commercial efforts, which enabled me to have connections with people in industry and collaborators really in industry, and access to data sets that I would never have had otherwise, so that I could pursue the academic topics that I'm interested in.
Right.
It's pretty much the same thing as people who develop relationships with public officials. It works in very similar ways. It's just there's different rules of the game.
So how do you make sure to maintain control over, enough parts of the company so that they are focusing on those questions that you are interested in?
So the principle of maintaining enough control over the company is to not maintain control over the company. So never do I have any direct reports in these companies. Never do I take a position that involves me, telling people what to do. My model for creating these companies is I find a business driver. And I mean, let me go back. So the model is I do academic work. I create academic, articles and methods and software and by the usual rules of the university, when you invent something, the university is legally required to patent it. And that's what they do. Social scientists tend not to do this kind of thing because they don't know about it. But they're actually legally required to do it. There's a federal in the U.S. There's a federal law that requires the university to do it. You're supposed to have a report of invention to your university, and they do that. I happen to have been on an intellectual property committee. They appoint you to various committees around the university. I didn't really know what any of this was, so I brought with me a paper, and I was going to copy edit it while the committee meeting was going on. And I'm doing this, and I'm listening to these scientists talk about intellectual property, and they were talking about patenting things, and I finally say, so I don't really understand what can be patented. And they say, this kind of thing with hydrochlorinated, whatever it was, some kind of natural physical scientist thing. And so I said, but what could be patented in the social sciences? And of course, they didn't know about the social sciences, so it was hard to figure that out. And I finally picked up this paper that I had brought with me. I said, can we patent this? And I explained what it was. And they said, yeah, we could patent that. I said, okay, let's do it. I'll learn what intellectual property is, right? Let's do it. Yeah. That became Crimson Hexagon.
Wow.
And that became Crimson Hexagon. So that became first a series of academic articles. Then then the way the rest works is you can license it to a company. So you can do that where you don't have anything to do with the company at all.
Right.
Or since I got interested in how these companies are created and business strategy, which is utterly fascinating, I found a business driver, somebody who would be the CEO of the company, and I partnered with them to found Crimson Hexagon. That's what we did.
So many questions here. Okay. So, but please go ahead. Gary.
Okay. So we founded this company. The idea of the company was to go around the world, collect all publicly available social media posts. Back then it was the blogosphere. They were blogs. And we used the methods that we came up with to analyze them. And because we came up with particular methods that were better than anything available at the time. And so they did that. They got up and running. And then they were collecting all this data. Like, holy cow! They now collect somewhere near 1 billion social media posts that are publicly available a day. That's like an incredibly valuable data set, right? It came from the core of that came from Dan Hopkins, who's now at Penn, was a graduate student of mine. And I went into his office and I said, there's this book by Sid Verba that studies political activists. And what he did is he took, how do you study political activists? Well, he took a random sample of 15,000 people with Kay Schlossman and Henry Brady, narrowed it down to the 2,000 who were essentially political activists, asked them more detailed questions, and then wrote this very famous book. And I said, you know what, there's all these people writing blogs, and most of them are political activists. We could just collect those, use those methods from natural language processing in computer science, and we'd make all this progress. And why don't we do this? And so we worked on that. We eventually developed this technology because none of the methods in computer science came anywhere near close to working. So we developed this new technology, which was really cool because it was actually from work that I'd been doing in public health with a different person that was completely unrelated to the work on automated text analysis. So then in order to, it seemed, then we patented this idea from this committee. Then with Candace Fleming, who was the business driver, we founded this company. Years later, with two of my then graduate students, Molly Roberts and Jen Pan, we were working together, and we were going to come up with a new method of automated text analysis. That was our goal. And we thought, how are we going to do this? Let's take the method that we come up with and push it until it breaks, and then figure out where it breaks and try to improve that. That's sort of how you do it. Right. So we thought, as it happened, Molly and Jen both spoke Chinese. So let's try it in Chinese. So now, where do you get a database of Chinese language social media posts? We went back to Crimson Hexagon. I have access to it. So I don't take line authority in the companies, as I said, but I'm usually on the board, and in Crimson Hexagon, I was chair of the board. And I meet with the data science team, regularly. So I have access to the company. I know the company, and they give me, I can log on their interface. I download a database of social media posts in Chinese. And maybe you know the rest of the story, but we wound up writing these papers that was really fun on Chinese censorship.
On the Chinese censorship. That's a piece of work that you are quite famous for, and there are also some rumors that maybe the CIA was interested in parts of that at some point, that technology, or other, sort of intelligence agencies.
It could be. You never know what they're interested in, right? They don't tell you.
No, exactly. So we should leave that at that point. But actually going back to the idea or the things that you said about control, because you said there's an aligned interest, which you're making a good case for it. But I'm curious here, Gary, how do you sort of retain control without having control? That sounds like paradoxical. Could you elaborate?
It's a personal relationship. I mean, you don't have formal control over the company. Crimson Hexagon was founded with venture capitalists. They had a lot of control over the company. The executive team has a lot of control, but they would like a relationship with me. I mean, I'm on the board, of course, so I can tell them some things what to do. But for the most part, you develop a relationship. Like I have a reason to help the company, which I would do. I keep talking to the data science team, and then I talk with the board about business strategy, and and so all we wanted was a database. Like I wasn't going to get in their way. It was incentive compatible for them. And it turned out, we discovered that they were downloading Chinese language social media posts before the Chinese government could censor them.
Yeah, which is
amazing. Then they had it. Like they didn't know this. Like what a great discovery. And then we thought, let's forget about that paper on automated text analysis.
Right. Yeah. Which brings us to this, sort of being able to see opportunity. I think that's one of the critical sort of skills that you have to learn, both as an entrepreneur, but also as an academic, and able to, as we said, change questions or evolve questions according to the situation that you are in. And so like the same way, I guess, you resolve, maybe the wrong word to say conflict of interest, but if the company, has it happened that the company says, no, Gary, like this data is very important for XYZ business wise, sorry, you can't have access to it. And how would you handle that situation?
Well, along with all of the other social scientists that there ever were, we've been in that situation many, many times.
Right.
So it's not like that's a new situation. The new situation is that I have access to more than I did before.
Okay.
That's really the great thing.
And so finding these, you mentioned business drivers. I think that's a critical thing, because the next set of questions is sort of this process of going from zero, basically knowing nothing about this. And you can, anyone can read up, and there are basic information on university websites and so on. And I myself are interested in different parts of that. But besides those, usual things, could you just walk us through a little bit the process of finding these business drivers, thinking about the practicalities of investors? It just sounds like a big hill that you have to climb.
Well, like we're taught in the social science, in the academic social sciences, implicitly that there are people in the commercial world,
Yeah.
and since they exchange money, they're evil. That's roughly, and pretty much we expect in academia to get everything for free, and
Yeah.
that's okay. But the fact is that they exist not just to steal money for each other. A better way to think of what they do is, if you create value in the world,
Yeah.
then the normal thing is they pay you for it.
Yeah.
Right? And you know what? The cool Brandwatch is now part of Cision, which has so Crimson Hexagon changed its name when it merged with its nearest competitor, which was Brandwatch, and it's now bigger. So there are thousands of people with jobs that wouldn't have had at least these jobs without this. So like, what an awesome thing to have had a hand in creating. Like, that's really a neat thing.
Yeah.
So how do you do all this stuff?
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
you learn. I mean, you participate. You understand that the question is how to create value. How to create, not how somebody can give you money. That's not really relevant.
Yeah. So we think economic value. Yeah. But that's not what you're meaning. That's not what you're referring to.
No, that create value. Give something to somebody that somebody wants. Candidates that want to know what people think about them. Brands that everything from Kellogg's cornflakes to somebody that sells cars. They want to know what they want to understand what people think.
Yeah,
we're social scientists. We're behavioral scientists. That's what we study, right? And I realized that survey research, the way they thought about the population was representative, right? You have to take you have the population, you take a representative sample, you infer back to the population.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? That was not the definition of public opinion before survey research. The definition of public opinion before survey research was activated public opinion. It was people who the only people whose opinions counted back then was people who were in public, in the public square, trying to influence you, in newspaper editorials, at a dinner party, trying to talk to you. Survey research changed the definition of public opinion because the method changed.
Yeah.
Right? It's a different question. It's, to me, two interesting ways of thinking about things. Social media, I realized, made it possible to estimate activated public opinion just like it was 100 years ago.
Right.
And I thought that would be really interesting. All we have to do is figure out how to analyze the opinions in social media posts, which millions, now billions of people are putting out. The founding principle of Crimson Hexagon was that any social media made it at least theoretically possible for one person to write something, and at least potentially billions of other people to read it, but nothing made it possible for any one person to understand what millions or billions of people were saying. But we could do that.
Yeah.
So to me, that's value. That's value for us as social scientists. It seemed to be a value for other people.
Yeah.
And so they made something of it.
Right. And so this was one of the sort of the critical questions is this discovery of ideas, and not only that, is to filter the sort of the bank of ideas that you've created, which ones are worthy of pursuing. And I guess this is speaking a little bit to what you were saying right now, is to figure out that value in relationship to where you are and which context you are in, and then try to sort of select ideas depending on which ones have the best sort of chance of succeeding, or sort of is that sort of roughly?
Yeah, it's very similar to writing an academic article. You can have a great idea for a way to turn an academic work into a business, but not have the right people, or have the right people but not have the right resources, or have the people and the resources but it's the wrong time, or have the people and the resources and the time, but you need different kinds of people in addition who are experts in a particular area, or there's not enough computation power to make it fast enough, or there's no customers. One of the early problems in Crimson Hexagon was that there weren't enough social media posts about a particular topic. They'd finally convinced somebody that it would be a good thing for them to have, and nobody was writing about that thing. Well, now people write about everything in social media.
Right, exactly. It's like it's an established topic.
Yeah. I mean, really, this was me going into a different field, and the field wasn't outside of academia. It was really what they teach in business schools.
Right.
Because frankly, sort of just between you and me, we're sort of taught that people in business schools are sort of blow a lot of smoke.
Yeah.
It turns out actually they teach things that have real value. They actually know stuff.
Yeah.
And so I got to study that field and learn some about what they did and how they did it. And when you can make connections between fields in academia and in this way, actually outside, it makes us all better.
Right. Because, starting the second company or, 2+ or whatever, that's easier. I think that going from 0 to 1 is really where the big trick is. So how was it? How was it the first one? Was it like you went to the Harvard Business School, or was it like how did you how did you figure things out? It just sounds so. There's a manual for it, I guess, but that doesn't give you, people to call, and people will need to trust you.
Yeah. So in most universities, there's something like an Office of Technology Development, and they're designed to help commercialize academic ideas. I didn't think about it as commercializing academic ideas. I thought about it as leveraging the commercial world, but that's okay. It's a similar thing.
Yeah.
So I talked to them. I got some advice, and I read the business literature.
Yeah.
I found somebody that I could work with to help found the company
through Harvard.
Yeah. And you learn to talk to people. So the way venture capitalists work. By the way, most of my companies are not venture funded. Much more fun than.
So how are they funded?
You do it on your own. One way of thinking about it is, I don't mean funded on your own, and that's not what I mean. I mean, you get a contract right at the beginning.
Oh, I see.
And that's enough to get going, or you put your own time in.
Yeah.
Until you can get. It's like. It's really easy in business to come up with an idea to make $1 billion. That's trivial. But to come up with an idea that can make the first 1,000, that's hard.
Right. That's exactly what I'm meaning. You're going from zero to one.
Yeah. $0 to $1. That's that's right.
From 0 to
it's really not fundamentally different than having a group of people inside the university funded on NSF grants, which. Believe me, I have lots and lots of those. We all know, we all understand that. It's very similar on the outside. You have to, you employ somebody, they're on a short-term contract because the grant only goes until here. Yeah. And now it's on you to go get the next contract to make sure you don't lose them, because if there's a gap of a month, and you get another contract, like what's that person going to do? Like, they have to pay for their mortgage and their rent and their salary or whatever it is, or then their food, and it's your responsibility to make sure that happens. So it's quite similar.
So that's interesting. So basically through Harvard support, you got in touch with what you call a business driver, a person that helps out with the takes some part of the leadership over how to do it, but that's what collaboration is all about in the end. And so how does so I know that American universities, they correct me if I'm wrong here, so they if you develop an algorithm, they sort of have ownership over the ability. I mean, you are the developer. That they would never take that away, but they sort of own the patent, or how does it work? So
the way it usually works in the U.S. and most other countries, most other developed countries too, but in any event, I know about the U.S. They patent it. And by which I mean they spend all the money necessary to pursue the patent.
Okay.
And then if you start a company, the patent gets licensed to the company.
Oh, I see.
If you don't start a company and it gets licensed to some other company, it gets licensed to that company.
Oh, I see.
And in return for that, the university gets some payment. If you start the company yourself, the university will get a couple of % of equity in the company.
Oh,
so if it actually sells at some point or makes some money or whatever it is, some money goes back to the university. And then by common arrangement within the university, different places in the university get their piece of you.
I
right?
see.
So the president's office probably gets some money, and the dean's office probably gets some money,
Right.
and your department probably gets some money, and some of it comes back to you.
Okay. Well, that sounds
So
fun.
what some people do is they don't want to have anything to do with the business world.
Yeah.
Their work is patented. It is licensed to some other company, and they have nothing else to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. And you'll get you'll actually make some money all the way at the end of the day.
Okay, so
But
basically.
I think you could do that. You could do that. But I think you give up so much.
Yeah.
You give up the relationships with these companies. You give up the
Right.
possibility of expertise that you don't have. You give up the possibility of things like, when I want to build something in the university, I can usually build one-off projects to write papers. But if you want to monitor something like social media over time or something like that, we built that. But when, during final exams and Thanksgiving and my whole workforce disappears,
Yeah, I know. That's very frustrating.
That's no good. That's no good, right? There's things the commercial world does better.
Right.
And it makes you better, and it makes your work better. So I would encourage people to do that, but to do it, you need to go figure out how that world works.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like if you're going to publish a paper in a field that you have not previously done, you have to understand the people in that field. It's the same sort of story, but it is so much value if you do it.
Yeah, I mean, the hurdle is, because we don't get the training, the hurdle is sort of larger for a social scientist compared to, say, a computer scientist or a natural scientist that might have that in their cultural DNA. So it's easy for them to sort of do that. But for social scientists, it just seems like alien. But this is what the conversation is about, is to make it less alien.
Yeah, talk to somebody that's done it before.
Yeah, yeah. But
it's not that hard. It's not that hard, really, and there's lots of tremendous advantages.
Yeah, but Gary, so all of this stuff that you've done in methods, I mean, you've developed several different algorithms with collaborators and so on. So all of those get patented under Harvard license, or is it just a subset of them, or how does Harvard select which of these things would actually be?
So the standard rule, it's not just Harvard, but American universities, is anything that could have commercial value, that's an invention, they will go ahead and try to patent it.
Right.
I could tell them I don't want them to do it, and they'd usually listen to me. But that's roughly speaking the rule. There's an actual act of Congress, the Bayh-Dole Act, which basically requires this. And the reason why is because if you have an idea and it's not patented, then a company couldn't use that to create commercial value. And there's a lot of things out there that mean that what that means is that the invention itself wouldn't have value.
Yeah.
Right. So the purpose of this is not for the university to make money. It's not for anybody to make money. It's to give the invention itself value. So there are pharmaceuticals that if we had over-the-counter administration of this pharmaceutical, near as anybody can tell, and we gave it to the entire population, the whole population would live longer lives. Heart disease would go down by a good amount, but it was never patented. There's no way to actually have a patent on it because it's all it's too late. Basically, it's all open source stuff already.
Yeah,
and there's no and for a pharmaceutical company to run the clinical trials to really prove that would cost $500 million or $1 billion. It's just like what a waste, right? So that's the idea, and the way universities do it is they don't just sell it to the biggest bidder. What they're really trying to do, at least according to the rules, is trying to make sure that the idea retains value. So they don't sell the patent; they license it. So that's important. What they do is they license it to your company, and if you use it and you keep using it, and you continue to provide value to people, then that's fine, no problem. You have exclusive use of it. But if you stop using it, or you're not able to create value with it, whatever it is, the university will take it back and see whether we can get somebody else to do it.
Oh,
right?
interesting. They
It'd be
would
nice if they did that with our academic articles. You know, this article is in the American Political Science Review, but nobody's reading it. We're going to take it back from that and give it to the AJPS.
I think that might be healthy for the academic community, given that how many papers are published just because they're because of the publishing machines that we are in. But that's interesting. So the okay, so much of the work that I know that you have done, Gary, is sort of in causal inference, and for example,
actually, Adele, can I just add one more thing?
Yes, please.
You don't need a patent to start a company. You can. That's one way of doing it. And if it's patentable, you patent it. But that's not an essential piece of it.
Right.
So
right.
Just so you know. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so that's actually a good point that I might want to follow up on, which is that how to I mean, if you don't have anything that gives a unique competitive advantage in the market, if you don't license or have an algorithm or what, how do you then do it? Is it like how do you build value? Protect value.
Suppose you're just offering something that nobody else offers. Wouldn't people and people want it? Then they'll pay you for it.
So it's basically a consultancy type of, like, if I know about X, no one knows about X. Basically, very few people know about X. And I mean,
so you're worried about building a moat around you, as they said,
well,
so that other companies can't come in.
That's sort of what we used to, right? To think like, at least as a social scientist, we think that, in order for me to go into the market, I have to be fit for fight, right? I mean, meaning competition, right? And so I need to protect.
So the key in business is to not compete. You don't want to compete. You want to differentiate. It's quite the same in academia. If someone else published an article showing the relationship between these two variables, and you were to do exactly the same thing, you would get like no credit at all, right? In academia, 100% of the credit goes to the first discoverer of it. So we do the same. What we do is then we try to differentiate in some way, right? We look for a different way of pursuing the question, a different method, perhaps just a different replication, a different test of the same hypothesis. Yeah. But we have to differentiate. Same thing in business. In business, if you're just trying to build exactly the same product that somebody else has, you'll just compete on price until that goes down to zero.
That's
not very interesting. It's not very interesting or useful, right? I mean, it might be okay to reduce the price. That's okay. But much more interesting is do something. I mean, let's put it this way. If you and I built something that was competing with someone else, and we were really good, we might be 30% better than them, 50% better than them, maybe twice as good as them, okay? Right. But if we did something that no one else was doing, we're infinitely better than everybody else. Right. That's both in academia and the commercial world. That's what you really want to show.
It's like dividing by zero, basically. You get infinity.
Yeah.
Because there's no one there, right? The zero is
That's right. There's nobody there. That's right. It's a completely new thing. That's what you really want to do.
Interesting. And then it means also that, you have to have enough competence, obviously, but that's studying the market, that that you're starting an idea that is unique and worth pursuing, which goes back to the question of, which ideas to pursue. We can come up with many ideas. That's what we get paid for as academics. But which ones are worthy of going to become a venture startup?
You have to figure out the academic idea, and then you have to figure out the idea in the world.
Yeah.
And that's a different kind of process. That it has to, like, we're fascinated by these academic ideas that we come up with, but not that many people read the political science journals, so we have to figure out a way that it would be useful out there in the world. And sometimes, not every time, but sometimes it is of use in the real world, and it's good for us to recognize that.
Yeah. I mean, that's another thing. I think maybe it's a bias, which is that as an academic, we think that we should always be at the state of the art in the science, which is a worthy pursuit, obviously. But it hits me sometimes that you might not need the same very fleshed out, state of the art, super shiny idea to create a startup out of that. Is that right, or am I thinking about this in the right way?
Well, the business wants, to create the business, you want to make sure that you have something that is of real value.
Which goes
if you create it. So I find if you created a new academic idea, a new way of doing something, then that's a better way of creating a commercial operation. I mean, to me, those are the kind of businesses I want to get involved in. Right, one's based upon my academic work, because that's our comparative advantage, right? That's what we know about. So it's just, we have to go another step, because you can't stop there.
No, exactly. I mean, this is where it gets back to those questions that we have talked about now for some time. So the timing then, Gary, the timing of initiating an idea. Say that you got a project, it goes on for 3 years, say, and you're going to pursue this very interesting idea. You work on it, you come up with some discovery at year 1, you keep on developing it. At what points do you recommend that we should start initiating a startup, a spin-off, or one?
Yeah, I mean, it works the way the way it does when you're doing an academic article. Like a really good academic article, you're talking to people and trying to figure out what the paper's about, and what you're going to work on, and how you're going to do it, and how you're going to split things up. You have to have those conversations in the business world too. And since it's not our thing, we probably have to have more of those conversations. Right. But there's lots of people to have those conversations with. So some of them are, you and me, but there's people in the business world. There's venture capitalists who like to talk to everybody. There's people that have started businesses. There's potential customers. I think you need to have those. You need to figure out what people really want. You can think about it. It's easy to think about it in your own personal life. What product would you like to buy that is not for sale? Now, the result of our work may not produce that product, but when there's an alignment, then it might be useful.
So what you're saying, Gary, I hear you saying is that it doesn't really matter at what year. You should think about timing in conjunction with the conversations that you're having with those partners. It could be year 1, could be year 2, could be year 5, like 2 years after the project is done.
I think so. I think the goal is not commercialization. I think the goal is to leverage that world and to have the biggest impact. Right? So sometimes it turns out the biggest impact is to make it all open source, but sometimes it's to make it commercial. But in all cases, you have to understand who you're dealing with. I can give you an example. We can. So in my own classes, and turns out from education research, we know that if you assign reading to your students, unfortunately, about 20 or 30% of the students will actually do the reading. So that's not so good. It also makes the classroom experience not as good either, because people aren't quite prepared. How do you get everybody to do the reading? So with my collaborators, Eric Mazur and Brian Lukoff, we worked on this, and we realized that the motivations of human beings, much of them, some of it is content, and some of it is social. And if you think about a classroom, when it works really well, it's like a concert, right? Everybody's together. It's a collective experience. We pay approximately 47 times more to go to a concert when we choose to go than to buy the streaming, iTunes music, right? Why is that? The fidelity of the music is not any better, right? It's just because of the collective experience. So the classroom is like that. But the out of classroom experience of reading is a solitary experience, right? You go, you sit, you read by yourself. So, but that's not motivating for human beings, because we're really social animals.
Right.
So the question is, how do we make that into a collective social experience? So that's what we did with perusal. So the word perusal means to read. You add an extra L, and it's peruseall.com. Right? And so it's a good example to be using here, because we're academics. This is for academics. We made it for us. Okay. So peruseall.com, so we designed it. Think about how you design this. We have designed it for the students. So it's a social e-reader. It works for the students, and it also works for us as faculty. So for students, just to give you a little feel for what it does, is it looks like an e-reader. On the screen you can read the textbook, but down the left-hand side of the screen you can see the little faces of your friends, your classmates. You can highlight something and say, I don't understand this. You don't have to wait till office hours on Thursday, right? You can say, I don't understand this, and other students can respond in threads to that original annotation, sort of Facebook style. We can grade the annotations and other kinds of interactions on the platform better than a human being could automatically. We can give you scores for that. We can try to get you 100% of that score if the professor is going to use that in their grades by giving you little nudges. You know, like if you skip pages 61 to 67, we know that, right? You know, not we, but I mean, Perusal knows that. And it'll say, hey, you skip pages 61 to 67. Right. That's okay. It's totally up to you. It's totally private. No one's ever going to know this. But just so you know, on page 64, your friends are on page 64 right now, and they're talking about it. This is something really important. You might want to go there. Nice. And we know how to say that in a way to get you there. And so that and a whole bunch of other things will more than double the percentage of students that do the reading without the usual methods that we use to make students do the reading, which are like pop quizzes, which are just terrible, right? We hate writing quizzes. Students hate taking the quizzes, you know. The ones that do the best hate it the most because if they miss something, it's just because like they weren't paying exactly attention to what happened on the bottom of page 12. Right. Okay, so we have to make this product incentive compatible for the deciders, the academics, us, the faculty, right? How do we do that? We automated everything. So for a faculty member, it takes 15 minutes at the beginning of a classroom. At the beginning of the semester, you would devote 15 minutes to getting it set up. And then for the rest of the semester as the instructor, you don't do anything. Everything else is managed automatically by Perusal and by the students. So it's incentive compatible for the students. It's much more fun to do the reading. It puts the content front and center. It's incentive compatible for the instructors. They don't have to put time in. That's the thing. That's our biggest scarce resource. Right. And then I'll give you the business idea, just to connect it back to our conversation. So in order to make this thing work, we did it in academia at first, but you know, this is keeping the trains running on time. You know, it has to be, you know, if you're really going to have your colleagues at other universities use it, there has to be somebody there in case it goes down to bring it back up immediately. You know, so it has to be there. Service needs to run. Exactly. So we can't run in any university forever. So we unmoored the ship and got it to run. But for that to happen, there has to be some money so we can pay the employees. How does that? But wait a second, we talked about earlier that we're academics. We expect everything to be for free, right? So how do we make money when everything's for free? Right? It's not making money. It's like a paradox. We want to pay the employees. So how do we keep the employees working without paying them? That's not going to happen. No. So you need a business model such that it doesn't seem like anybody's paying anything, but we still make money. So that's the trick, right? Wow. So that's a hard problem. Here's how we solved it. I don't know if it's the right answer, but here's how we solved it. Perusal is free to students, it's free to faculty, it's free to universities, but we still make enough money to stay in business. So how do you do this? so here's how it works. Without Perusal, students would go to the bookstore. Yeah. They go to the bookstore and they buy the book and they go home. But the way that works is the bookstore gets the book from the publisher at a discount, like 70%, right? They only have to pay 70% for the book. They mark it up 30% for the service of providing it to the students. Well, of course, we're digital, right? We don't need a physical place to buy books, right? So we sort of replace the bookstore. The instructor says, we'll all be using Perusal. It'll all be on Perusal. Class participation grades will be combined with the Perusal engagement score. And so everybody's going to do this. Students will then go on to Perusal to access the book. They'll pay for it. There's an e-commerce thing they'll use their credit card or their financial aid points or whatever it is through Perusal. Okay. We get the discount from the publisher. We get the markup, right? And we use that to pay the employees to keep the thing in business. Right? So it seems like it's free to everybody, but actually it turns out, and then we noticed that universities would come to us and say, hey, we'd like to buy a license. And we'd say, no, it's free. It's okay. We'd say, no, we'd really like to buy a license anyway. And we'd say, okay, well, tell us more about that. Exactly. I was going to say, I was 100% sure that you're going to say it's free for students and instructors, but not the universities. Universities pay. No. It's free to universities too. But if they want specialized services,
Sure.
like specialized like legal agreements and various access to data and stuff like that, that's fine. They want to pay for that, and we will
You
accommodate
can do
that.
that's so smart. And the students can still access their books and whatever when they've taken the class and they still want to revisit the website, or I don't know, they can download the book as a PDF or as an EPUB or whatever, and they can.
Well, they can access it there online. Not only the book, but their questions and the answers they got from their fellow students, and their fellow students' questions and their answers. They can look at heat maps of where other students were interested in the book.
Yeah.
That's
so
and it's not only, I'm sorry, not only the book, but videos as well, right? Like this video you could put in Perusal. People could stop the timeline, ask a question about it. Other students can respond Facebook style at that point in the timeline.
So this sounds like the beginning of a sort of personalized education algorithm, right? So we have personalized medicine, we have soon personalized social policy, public policy interventions, but this could be a platform for doing that. It could be used beyond universities. It could be used at
yeah, that's right. I mean, there's about 2 million students using it now.
Wow.
And they're not all. Most of them are at universities, but they're not all at universities.
Interesting. So the business model, I mean, sounds so fascinating, because I am, my training is in sociology. I'm a global poverty researcher, and I study poverty. I love methodology. I develop some methods, use satellite data and all kinds of fancy things. But for me, it just sounds very alien to be able to take that and somehow make a product that is somehow going to make money so it could live its own life out of poverty, right? But poverty research.
Well, think about this, right? So we can get so people in impoverished areas, or impoverished people, or impoverished parts of the world can use Perusal with open source materials for free.
Right.
So now we can get them. If you, roughly speaking, Perusal doubles the amount of reading students do, at least. Okay. Wow. So if we can get that to the developing world, like, wow, and yeah, that's open source materials, right? So then we don't make anything. That's fine. That's fine. That doesn't scale forever, but if we're able to make enough money in areas where it's normal for people to pay, that's fine.
Exactly. Yeah. Or you can, maybe get Bill Gates on board and he pays for the access or whatever, the aid money flowing around.
Could be. That's right. I mean, eventually, or and they could give us the money to run this, or they could give it to the open source materials. I mean, that's fine.
That's so fascinating. So how did you come up with this model? I mean, like, how did you converge to this is the business model we should be using for?
So we saw the problem, which is there has to be money that pays these employees, right? They're not going to do it out of the goodness of their heart, right? They have to be paid, right? They have, right? So where are we going to find this from? Well, we could charge per student, right? Yeah. And of course, it could have worked that way, where instructors charge, but then everybody's paying for it, and it just doesn't seem as friendly, right? We wanted something that we would regard as the customers as friendly. Right. Exactly, so we just replaced the bookstore. By the way, shouldn't bookstores be upset with us? Turns out no. So the story with bookstores is they don't make much money, or almost any money, from books. They make almost all their money from the sweatshirts, and with the name of the university on it. And in fact, if you go to a lot of college bookstores, it says what the price is at Amazon and Chegg and various other places.
They say go buy it there.
Yeah, like it's fine. You can go get it somewhere else if you want. Like don't bother us about the price.
Right.
So they're for the most part not upset with us, right? Okay. So we just looked for something that was incentive compatible so that we could provide this. We think this is a lot of added value. I know it is for our students. But still, you have to figure out the business thing. It's like you're in that world. You have to speak that language and understand it.
So I really like what you're saying here, Gary, because you're saying, we shouldn't, the motivation is to solve real problems in the world or academia, whatever you are in. And that's where the main added value. It's not necessarily economic value. It's just the added value of solving a problem for someone else or for yourself. But it has to be viable, right? So we need it to go around. We need to have an economy in it. And for that, we need to find ways of sort of navigating that field. And there are different ways of doing it. And so whether it's, under pure entrepreneurship, for-profit or non-profit, or social entrepreneurship, it doesn't matter as long as you're solving the problem. The problem is sort of your main guiding star, right? Is that a
and I think you do whichever of those paths is produces the most value and gives you the most leverage.
Yeah.
So I've created a number of nonprofits and centers that are within well, first of all, I founded the Institute for Quantitative Social Science, and then a number of
did that, Gary? Okay, that's interesting.
A number of centers within it, and then what we've specialized in is creating projects that become programs, that become centers, or become nonprofits, or become for-profits. Which way to go depends upon what works for that particular idea.
Oh, wow.
But you want the idea to grow and to live.
But you said something really interesting here. So you and your collaborators initiated the Institute for Quantitative Social Science. Was that so that you have to tell me some more. so that's entrepreneurship within academia. But how?
Yeah, that's right.
Like that's fascinating. How? Tell us some more.
Yeah. So in the sciences, if a major university hires a chemist or a physicist, they give them several $1 million in startup money and 3,000 or 4,000 square feet of space and a dozen employees, and and they get up and running. I promise you, when a social scientist is hired or an English professor is hired, like, that's not on offer.
No, exactly.
In the social sciences, because they are being sort of ripped out of the humanities and put into the sciences, we could actually productively spend that money now. But as I said, it is not on offer. Okay?
No, yeah.
But it turns out it's not necessary for the social sciences. But it's not that we don't need that. We do need it. But we can work together. It's not true that each of us has to build our own lab. Right? It could be that we work together. And if we have a great set of computer servers, my graduate students and I can bring it to its knees. But when we're not using it because we're writing up our paper or working on the next thing, you can use it.
Yeah.
And it turns out there's lots of shared infrastructure we create. So we've been trying to create this shared infrastructure model. We're trying to make IQSS the place where you're able to do research better, faster, and more efficiently than anywhere else. Of course, we're in a field which I love to be in, which is different than the commercial world. In the commercial world, if I give you something, I have less of it. In academia, if I give you something, I have more of it.
Right.
So there've been lots of institutes and centers that have been created at other universities, sort of quite like IQSS, and they come to Harvard for a visit, or sometimes a virtual visit, and we show them how we did what we did, and so we're happy that they do that, because then we'll try to take it up to the next level.
That's fantastic. Well, maybe at some other point, Gary, happy to talk a bit more in depth about that. I mean, I am at the Institute for Analytical Sociology at Linköping University. There, we are we have the IQSS as one model, and we're trying to emulate that within the conditions that we have. But that, to some extent, that's a separate conversation that we can take up besides sort of the entrepreneurial side here. So we are reaching the end here, Gary, for this conversation about the entrepreneurial side of things here, of how to pursue that. So what maybe ending advice that you would like, things that we haven't touched upon that you wish that we have talked about in this conversation as sort of an ending theme?
Oh, I don't know about things there's lots of other stories I could give you, where we could talk about and we could analyze. We could figure out different directions to go. But we are taught as academics to put our head down, shut the door, turn off the music, and read and focus and program and write. And we should do that. But we should also go talk to the people next door and figure out what they do and how they work, and not only the academics, but people out there in the non-academic or real world. And if we can find incentive compatible ways of working together, it will make us all better. So that's really the question, and that's what I'd encourage folks to do.
Right. So basically, as a social scientist, it's not a hopeless pursuit to to think outside of academia at all. I mean, oftentimes, this is perhaps some of the stories goes that social scientists, some of them just quit their academic job and then they go to sort of outside of the industry. They do some great things there instead of staying in academia. You basically talking about the third model here, Gary, which is not so much talked about, which is to leverage the business world for a sort of a combined synthetic pursuit hybrid mode of operating.
Yes, that's exactly right. But let me just add that it's not a crazy thing. I mean, I don't think you're describing what I'm doing as crazy, but I don't think it's crazy for a social scientist to do this. Look at what are the big tech companies?
No, it's just unusual, I think. It's unusual, yeah.
No, but what are the big tech companies? The big tech companies are basically giant social science experiments. Like what's Facebook, right? You just rearrange social connections. It's just a giant experiment with no control group, sort of like most government policy. Right? Google is, I mean, all of these companies are essentially big social science experiments. They've got lots of computer science, lots of technology, lots of other things, but so the social science piece of it is essential. We know that they know this because they're coming and stealing our students at extraordinary, almost frightening rates.
I agree.
So as we have more to do with the real world, they have more to do with us, and we get to learn more, and they get more benefit as well.
Right. So. Okay, that's a great sort of takeaway from this. I mean, for me, this is something I've been thinking about quite some in the past, and now as well as we start sort of using more and more interesting data in different ways. And I'm sure there is a set of social scientists that are thinking about that, but perhaps are afraid to take the step to even utter a question about this, because the culture of social scientists is not so much in that regard. So I think this is a very inspiring conversation with you, Gary, to take this and show a new wave, a new mode of operations with business and academia jointly.
Cool. Well, thanks for arranging it.
Thank you very much, Gary. So I'll see you at some other point soon. Thank you.
Take care.